You're tuned in to Tom Foolery.
All right, another episode of Tom Foolery. We got Cat Silva back on, and my co-host Dakota should be here a little bit later. He's running a little bit behind, so we'll get him in when we can. What's up, Cat?
Hey, back again.
You came on last
Good.
time. Did that go well? Did you have good reactions to that or anything?
Yes, yeah. And it was nice just being able to have a conversation with somebody without like arguing, just talking about it. So
That's the issue online. Like, I hate it on Facebook and Twitter and all of these other things where I don't feel like they read my tone very well. Like, they understand that we are on opposite sides of the discussion, and so they immediately feel like I'm attacking them when I personally don't feel like I'm attacking them, and they get very angry pretty quick and snap back at me. And I always think, like, man, if I could just get them on the podcast and they could hear me and like have a conversation with me, they would understand this is not how I'm coming at them. But either way, it's hard to read that, especially in text messages and stuff like that. So this is better. This is much easier.
yeah, but even when you're being extremely like nice and stating those caveats, like, by the way, I'm not trying to be rude. Like, we're having a conversation. People automatically get defensive. They don't want anything they think questioned. So it sucks trying to have a conversation online, but.
Well, you and I have done this for years, like, especially online, gone back and forth on each other just nonstop. And neither one of us ever really seemed to get offended. Like, we would just take opposite sides on an argument and go on for a couple of days until one of us didn't care. But
yeah, I don't really get offended. I just kind of think getting offended is it's pointless. It kind of ends the conversation and then it takes it in a whole different light. So it would just be better if we didn't take so much offense at everything.
I think, I personally, I have this conversation with people all the time, and I say, like, I think getting offended is a choice that you make. This is not like a normal emotion where, like, somebody does something and you're immediately, like, your emotions change. Like, I truly feel like you make a conscious decision on whether or not to get offended, and people who make that decision a lot really bothers me. I don't think I've ever been offended my entire life. Now, yes, I understand in the political, sphere right now, a white straight male is the last one who should get offended. But anyways, I think people try to offend me a lot as well. And I might get angry like that's what they're doing, but I'm not really offended by it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, because it's kind of an initial reaction when you read something, and it's kind of like either like shock or aggravation or confusion, but I think it's how you deal with it and what you do after, as opposed to just saying like, well, I'm offended. Like, you can't say what you're thinking because I'm offended by it.
Yeah. And that's one of the cool things I love about podcasts. Like, nowhere in life do I ever call somebody and be like, hey, let's go ahead and schedule out a 2 to 3 hour conversation where we're just going to sit and talk. Not about anything specific. We're just going to sit and talk for 2 to 3 hours. Let's do it. Like, that never happens in life. This is the only time I ever call somebody and say, hey, let's sit and talk for 2 to 3 hours. And they're always like, about what? And I'm like, who cares about anything? Let's just do it.
Sadly, because of the internet, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
We can just do it online. But yeah, it takes away from that tone.
Yeah. Well, and I also, so getting back to being offended, I actually think that the right, in politics, the political right used to be the one that actually got offended all the time. And I think that it's actually more common on the other side now. Do you disagree with that? Or?
I still think it's both. And it just depends what the topic is. Because if you bring up something like religion, well, most of the right gets offended. Like, that's an automatic. If you bring up, rights or race or anything like that, the left tends to be offended mostly by that. So I think it depends on what we're talking about. And I think right now we're really focused on race and rights for different groups of people. So it just may seem like it's all coming from the left, but I think just depending on the topic, the right's doing it too.
Well, I actually think that the left is actually more political these days. I think that because of, I guess, identity politics or whatever you want to call it, the different subgroups that are on the left that, are very defensive for those groups immediately now become very political to get in on the conversation and understand what it is about their lives that might be changing or isn't changing or whatever. And so I think that on the political left, that it is more likely for people to be engaged in politics than it is on the right. Because I swear, I have conversations with people all the time. I know this guy that's Mexican, but he's on the right and a Christian. And there will be times where, yes, and we'll talk about something about, the wall. And he'll be like, yeah, man, I came here legally. All those dang Mexicans bringing all the drugs and raping all our women, they won't stop coming over here and doing all this stuff. And I'm like, that's not true, though. Right? Like
that's not accurate.
Yeah, so I was like, that's not really true, though. And he's like, no, it is, man. I see it all the time. Like, no, you don't, though. You don't see that all the time. Like, no. That's not true.
I think you have two types of people who get something and they're genuinely happy for others who get it as well. And then you have people that get something and then they're like, no, screw anybody else getting it. And to me, that's just, I don't know if it's ignorance or if it's selfishness, but it's completely inaccurate. And that's what I'm more concerned about.
What do you mean they get something?
Like somebody that got to come over here legally. And then they're like, nope, screw anybody else being able to do the same. Because it's not the same for everybody and, different situations.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes. Look, we've had the conversation about even on the last podcast. I feel like there is a limit to how many people we can have here for things to run as successfully as it does. And
agreed.
I also think that, and I hate saying this because I feel like I sound like a racist one way or the other, but I do think that what our culture is like and what we want as a society does matter. And if we have people who come from a different, and I don't mean culture, I mean society, that come from a different sort of society that may not have the same values or appreciate freedom and things like that the same way that we do, that our society then starts to change, and then even our politics and our government starts to change and go into a different direction where it's not appreciated as much. And that's what I'm afraid of, specifically with as much immigration as it comes from specific places.
What type of American society, what would that entail? That's strictly American as opposed to a mesh of different cultures put together.
Okay, so there are places that have freedom of speech. They don't have it, though, technically in their, constitution. They don't have a constitution where it says no matter what the law wants to do, no matter what the government wants to do, no matter what the people want to do, you cannot take freedom of speech away because it is written right here in the Constitution that you can never do that. And other countries don't have that, and I don't think they have the same appreciation for it. And things like gun laws and stuff, restrictions, we can get into that another time, but the right to own a gun, the right to bear arms, I think that these are things that maybe they're not as appreciated by other people. The right to, practice whatever religion you want, or, whatever, just the rights of freedom that I feel like other countries and other people coming over may not appreciate the same as us. And then the more and more our population starts to veer into immigrants, and immigrants at a certain pace to where there may be 10% of the United States at a time, not the biggest deal. But if within 40 to 50 years, immigrants have taken up almost 50% of our population, at that point, yes, I start to get fearful, and I start to think this, for my children, for everybody else, this could possibly turn into something else.
Is there not American citizens who are, I guess for another term, white, who also have issues with the Second Amendment and with freedom of speech?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So it's kind of a moot point if people come here and maybe don't quite appreciate the Second Amendment, because you have Americans who are split on all of those issues as is. But the good thing is that since it's in the Constitution, I mean, it would have to take an overwhelming majority of the country to be completely against that for it to be changed. Right,
but that's what I'm saying, though. Okay, these are people that are not born here. They're like people who are born here. I think it makes sense that they have different politics and different things like that. But other people coming from other countries who do not even care to take the time to learn the language are not going to appreciate the society that we already have here. And if, say, all of a sudden we have a bunch of Muslims coming over from the Middle East, and they feel like, hey, we should be able to beat our wives. We should be able to do all these other things that we did in our old country. Well, as long as we get a majority, when we get more and more people over here, we're going to be able to keep changing more and more laws. And I'm not saying that's what's happening right now. I'm saying that if you look further down the line, these are possibilities when they come at such a large rate all at once.
I genuinely haven't met, I've met a good bit of Muslims, but I know there's obviously like extremists, and they adapt pretty well to the culture, and they learn the language, and they understand that even though they may not necessarily agree with some stuff, that this is the law of this country, so they have to follow it. So
the language part is
even some
to like people coming from Mexico and on the southern border is what I was talking about, specifically for not learning the language.
I have met a good bit of people, but I would say we'd have to look that up. The majority of them probably have learned to speak the language very well. I mean, you have to. Unless you're in like a completely, like Miami, you don't necessarily have to learn it because it's mostly, immigrants and mostly Hispanics. But
well, I worked in construction for a long time. My dad ran a business as well, nonstop. You're just picking up people at the Goodwill or at the Home Depot, just standing out there, and they don't know how to speak any English. And instead, I started to learn Spanish to communicate better with them. And it's the same wherever I work. And, I always have people come in who say, hey, I need somebody, or they call in, they say immediately, I need someone who speaks Spanish, because they're not going to be able to relay that. And that's consistently every day, on a consistent basis, to where it's common enough. I mean, I don't know what common enough means. Again, I don't want to sound like I don't want these people here. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying let people in just at a small rate. And I feel like I know that your feelings is that they let people in too slowly and take the process way too long, to where people who should be getting in and who are good citizens are not getting in and not getting the process sped up fast enough. And I understand that point, but how do we take all the good citizens everywhere? Like, do we, if everybody wants to come in, I feel like, instead of letting a flood come in, just dam it up for a little while and let a little leak out to to let groups of people in at a time.
Well, I think this isn't just an issue based on one thing. Like there's so many things contributing to the problems. One of them, which is the United States meddling in every country's business. So then they go into these countries and they make situations happen, which then make the problems in the country worse. And then they try to flee here. So people come here because America was supposed to be for refugees, kind of the whole thing of America. So people come here for that reason. So I think that if we stopped meddling and getting involved in all of this stuff and maybe fix things like the war on drugs, you know, it would help the problem rather than just, I guess, kind of putting it all on the immigrants.
See, I disagree. See, I'm on the exact opposite side of that, where I feel like if we went into these other countries and helped them more to where people didn't want to leave so badly, that we wouldn't have this issue and we could go ahead and do the things that we want to do without it being such a problem. But instead, because they are coming from such bad issues in the current country that they're in, that we have a bigger issue than we probably should.
I agree with you that, like, if we went in and helped them, like, that would be great. Like, if we set up a system for their economy to be better, for education, for things like that, that would be awesome. I'd be totally for that. But that's not what we do. Mm-mm. We go in and we're like, hey, let me get rid of this person because we don't like how they're doing their policy. And then we try to put in another person and it never works out well. And then we end up with civil wars all over the place.
Well, but the war on drugs is actually part of it now that I think about it. I mean, I know that Medellin was where the DEA went in there for a long time to try to help them with the cartels and help them with the drug problems. And they instead just actually started a real war that actually hurt the country a lot worse and got a lot more people killed instead of actually ending anything. Because every time they chopped off the head of the snake, another head grew back, so they didn't actually help any.
And sadly, the problem started way before that because there was a communist group that had kind of sprang up, and then the United States gave some of the people who were like cartel or guerrillas, gave them weapons to get rid of the communists. And now here we have with military weapons, and it started a civil war in the country that literally just hasn't quite ended, but they just signed a peace treaty with one of the groups. But it's just things like that. Like, we go in to start basically like a war within the country so that we can get what we want, instead of going in and educating people or helping them with figure out housing, their economy, stuff like that. So I would be totally for them going in and doing that, just not the way that they've been doing it.
Yeah, I think if they were more helping the people who were already, on the case over there, instead of saying, hey, we're here, we're in charge now, you can fall back, we got this, hold my beer, and instead they just, said, hey, we're here to support you, you tell us what to do and we'll go do that. Then they think they're smarter, and they might be. I mean, they're very well, the intelligence agencies that we have are very well funded and do really well. They're just they're not as accustomed to the areas that they're fighting in as the people who actually live there, and should probably help them more than take over.
Yeah, I total agreement.
So Democrats have like 100 people running for president. Are you still on the Bernie Sanders bandwagon?
So I think, I love Bernie, and I like Elizabeth Warren. I think she's great on figuring out policy. I just don't think she's like quite like strong enough to like get in there and fight if that makes sense, in the way that like somebody like Bernie Sanders would.
Sure.
So I know they're like, it's like Joe Biden, then Bernie, then Elizabeth Warren, and then I think Buttigieg, I believe. And I'm just shocked that Joe Biden is first. I don't know why I'm shocked, but I'm still shocked. And I think that would be the worst thing. Oh God, why?
I feel like it's so weird how the left, like, or how Democrats, it's the, like, especially I'm assuming it's what the DOC or whatever, they tear people down once they don't want them anymore. Like, they will go and do their own research on this person to make sure that they don't win. And that's obviously what's going on with Joe Biden. Like, they are purposely saying, we don't want him to win. He's on our side, but we are going to tear him down to make sure that he doesn't win. Even if he might be the best chance against Trump, we're still going to make sure that that doesn't happen.
I think they're kind of attacking Bernie the most, but that's because he's not an establishment Democrat. I would think that they'd want Biden some, but it's kind of moving further left now. So he's a centrist, and that's why I don't think it's going to turn out well if he wins, because look at what happened last election. Hillary is the definition of a centrist. That is literally the definition of a centrist. And
I wouldn't call her a centrist. But I would say that she's not a progressive, but she is like an extreme version of whatever it is of liberals. You know, she is definitely a lot more hardcore on things, just not exactly a progressive.
Yeah, I think she's a little further left, but she's pretty center. But it just hasn't turned out well with centrists, which is why I have nothing like, I think that Joe Biden's like a bad person or anything like that. I just don't think that that would be the best choice to run against Trump because of the way Trump is. And then you're going to throw in Joe Biden, who's a centrist, and then you have a good bit of the country asking for certain progressive things. And Joe Biden's basically going in and saying, like, don't worry, we're keeping everything the same, like nothing's going to change. And I think that that's problematic because people in the country want change. So I don't think that's a good idea.
I mean, even Trump running as a Republican was promising a lot of change. You know, he wanted all sorts of things to change. So it's never good to be like, hey, we're just going to sit back and watch. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to try to change anything. That's never a good idea because you sound like a person with no vision.
That's exactly the problem. He's just going in like, well, we're just going to go back to the way things were when we had Obama. No big deal. Or things are not going to change. We're just going to leave them as is. And that's obviously not working out right now other than for like corporate America. So it's just, I don't really see a point.
Yeah, I think that they're like purposefully going after Biden on like the whole like Me Too thing with Biden. Like that's over the top. Like it really is. And I'm not saying I don't want to say that people are lying or that it doesn't matter. But most of the stuff is them just saying, he made me feel uncomfortable. He talked too closely to me, or he shook my hand for too long, or he hugged me for too long, and it was awkward. And now he's, a sexual harasser or something. And it's like, dude, get out of here. Like, it's weird. And I said this before. It is weird when Republicans are coming to the defense of Joe Biden because CNN and MSNBC are just tearing him down because he's a part of the, what do you call it? The sensitive movement, the complaint movement. They want to have something to complain about all the time.
So I don't have nothing against Biden. I don't think he's like a inherently bad person or anything. And, it's the excuse that like he comes from a different time. Like, I don't know if you saw that where he like walked up behind that other lady that was running for something, and he like kissed her head and like whispered in her ear. I don't want. Oh no, have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh God. So here's my thing. That's not something that I'd be like, oh my God, like you need to go to jail or anything like that. It's just like, can you please respect my personal space? Because I don't want some random guy I've never met coming up behind me and kissing me in the head and whispering in my ear. So, but again, he is from a different era, but that's still not an excuse. Like, you have to go with the times. If women are telling you that they want their personal space respected, just respect it. Just don't do stuff like that.
That's the problem, though, is it's not like people are always telling him this and he's like, no, I refuse to do that. Like, no, like as soon as all these people came out, he's like, man, I didn't know that. I am so sorry. Like, I will try to learn and change this. But tell me if you can change my mind on this. Maybe I'm wrong. But from my own thought process, real quick, I feel like even with the people who come out of nowhere and are like, hey, this guy raped me 40 years ago, and now at the biggest moment of his life, I'm now going to choose to say something when I chose not to say something this whole time. I feel like you're hurting yourself and everybody else around you, and that person, true or not, you're hurting everybody more just by coming out this late. Like, and I feel like it's almost better to just stay quiet, even if it is just a hand on the side or something worse. I don't want to sound like I'm taking the side of somebody who's a rapist or something like that, but I just feel like you don't do yourself any justice either if you come out and wait this long.
So with a couple things, Joe Biden, this had came up before a few times, and he was told multiple times, and he just keeps doing it. So if it was just like he did it and then he was told and he's like, dude, I'm genuinely sorry, like I won't do it again, I didn't realize it, I would, heck yeah, props to you. But this is like, it just keeps happening and then he keeps doing it. So I don't know what like at what point do you stop doing it, or what needs to be said to you for you to stop?
I didn't know.
Yeah, it was minor, but it was like said multiple times before. But and then with the rape thing, women don't want to report a rape for lots of reasons. I mean, you don't want to be dragged through the system. It's already bad enough that it happened. You don't want to be put through that. So women just don't, a lot of times, don't come out and say it. And then a lot of times they wait. And then this is just like, if this for me and then the person then was like running to be president, I'd have to speak up. Because you waited all this time and it's like, okay, cool. But now he's like going to be in a position of power. And you don't want to let that go to where now he has the power and you don't know what he could potentially do. And that's why a lot of women then speak out during stuff like that. But it definitely, they end up getting like harassed and threatened and stuff. So it sucks. So I guess it just personally, it depends on balance, like what you'd rather live with.
Yeah, I understand all of that, and I don't disagree with any of it. I really do feel like they're hurting themselves worse at that point. And I'm sure it's going to be super hard if this guy raped you and every day you turn on the TV and there he is talking about his new policy because he's running the whole freaking world now. So like that would suck. That would be horrible and traumatizing, I'm sure, just pulling up a lot of PTSD. I get that. But
yeah,
still, and I'm not saying just a blanket statement, don't do it across the board. I'm just saying my own personal feelings, somebody from the outside who doesn't have this happen to them, who has never been raped or anything, it just seems smarter to, if you've been holding on to it for 50 years and didn't want to come out about it before, maybe for your own sake and for the people around you, just continue to not come out about it because you're probably going to hurt yourself worse in the end. It's hard to bring up anything from 50 years ago and have some sort of proof or anything. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it definitely sucks. And I will say for those women that love to do false accusations, it is, I don't know if I can cuss, but it's effed up. And you're hurting literally everybody, the men and the women, when you do stuff like that. So I definitely think if you falsely accuse people, you need to get time for that. Because
Yeah.
that's not like a playing matter. Like you are ruining people's lives and then you hurt all the other women who have been raped.
Yep. And it happens a lot. I mean, I don't want to say a lot, but it happens more than you would think it would. Like, it happens more than it should. It is,
Yeah.
That, I don't know. It just blows my mind. Like, every time, like, the whole thing with Kobe. Do you remember that Kobe Bryant? I know you're not into sports, but
No.
Kobe Bryant, back in the day, he was like the MVP and he was one of the best players and he was winning championships and everything. And then out of nowhere, this girl comes out and says, yeah, he raped me and he forced me to have sex with him and all of this stuff. And he was getting ready to get kicked out of the NBA. I mean, he was about ready to get kicked out of the world. Like, they were ready to just put this dude on a rocket ship and send him to another planet. But then it turned out she had 7 other types of male semen inside of her on the same day. And
Oh.
they're like, dude, you had sex with 8 guys in one day? Like, and we're
So
supposed to believe you?
was she like getting it or was she like prostituting? Like I haven't heard it. I don't watch sports, so I have no idea about any
I
of
don't
this.
I don't remember. I just know that it came out that it was almost for sure that she was lying, but she did have sex with him. He was married. Like, the next day they have a press conference, him and his wife, they're sitting next to each other and they look all sad. And she's got this new diamond ring that looks like this, just sitting
Oh
on
my
her finger. Like, yes, I've forgiven him and it's sad, but we're going to stay together.
God.
And just waving her hands around. Everybody's like, yeah, it's smart decision.
Yeah. No idea about sports, but I'm gonna go look into that and figure out who this woman was.
Well, I told you before to look into something called the grievance studies. Did you look into that?
Oh God. I remind me again because I did right after you told me, and now I can't remember what it was.
I sent you some links on it. So the grievance studies was where a couple of guys faked all of these studies that got into college. I don't know what you call it, but colleges for all of these studies. They won awards for them and everything, and they were obviously making stuff up. Like, if you hear
Yeah.
the stuff they're doing, but they figured out this, like, this I guess this standard where all you had to do was say that somebody in the status quo was hurting somebody who was not. They were so white guy does something bad, black guy does something good, study gets in. Great. Female is great and is a warrior, man is a pig and and shouldn't be in the world anymore. Awesome. Best article, best study ever. You win. It's ridiculous.
I did. I read a little bit on it, and I did see they did get some studies published, and that some were waiting when they found out that it was all this hoax. And
Yes.
I don't know how the process works for those types of studies, but like in science, you can
They were
publish
peer
something in
reviewed.
peer review. Yeah,
They were
but
peer
then
reviewed.
other peers have to then go back and review that. So
Mhm.
it's like just because it gets into a journal to begin with doesn't mean that it's not then going to be shown that it's not true. So, but it's sad. And I hate blanket statements so much. I hate them. So I hate when everybody's like, oh, well, no, all men are bad or all white people are bad or anything like that. So,
But this led to a blanket statement that said feminist theory is bad. or gender studies, are bad, or, pretty much across the board. And it's mostly grievance. That's why they call it the grievance studies, is because if you have some sort of grievance, if you feel like you are being persecuted on the left, they will make studies about it to prove it. And that's what all of these colleges and journals and even professors are doing. And this is why people on the right complain all the time about academia, and they're not happy about education in colleges and past high schools. They feel like there are so many professors who line up far, far left and are teaching this to their students. And it's not just random people that are hearing this on YouTube or something like that. This is our future. Like, this is America's future. These are people getting degrees and who are going to be running our country and have all the best jobs someday. And it's terrifying to think that they're going in believing that all white people are, still proactively trying to put the black man down, or something.
Yeah, I just hate that so much, because it takes away from dealing with the actual issues. Not that it's white people creating a system to hurt blacks, rather the corporations found this way to make money, and sadly it's affecting certain people disproportionately. And it has nothing to do with it's all the white people doing it to blacks or anything like that. So it just sucks, because it takes away from the focus of the actual issues.
Well, I mean, does Bernie Sanders even understand any of the actual issues outside of the top 1%? They're like, all right, so in Afghanistan, we have a lot of troops over there and they've got this problem. What do you want to do about it, Bernie? He's like, well, if the top 1% wasn't always trying to steal all the money from the poor, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And it's just always...
So I will say, like I said, Elizabeth Warren has better policy positions. Bernie's put forth some of them. But yeah, go watch some more stuff that he said. He gets into a lot of it. But I think he focuses on that because progressives, it's weird to say you're far left, because I don't necessarily agree with a lot of stuff extremist leftists as far as SJWs and stuff like that. I disagree with a lot of it. So I don't even know that I'm far left. That's why I call myself a progressive, because it's something completely different. But
they call themselves progressives as well. People are starting to have issues with progressives specifically because these are the loudest voices of the progressives.
So I think a lot of people are just calling themselves progressives now. Somebody who was making comments about Pelosi being a progressive, and she is absolutely not a progressive. So I'm not really sure about that type of stuff, because that's not even on the platform. But so the main focus is the fact that our politicians can basically take legal bribes from corporations. We as a nation the Supreme Court decided that a corporation can give donations to politicians, that is speech.
Freedom of speech, yeah.
Yeah, so now you have a problem in America where you can basically take legal bribes from corporations. So you have all these politicians on the left and the right, taking thousands of dollars from all these corporations. And then they go to vote for things, for policy, and it ends up magically being better for the corporation and affecting the actual people in just terrible ways. So their main focus is getting money out of politics, so that our politicians can vote for stuff that we want as a nation, as people, not what's going to benefit and make the corporations more money. And I think that's why Bernie focuses more on that.
So where does Kamala Harris then line up on this side? Because to me, that chick is just a total hack. But I'm wondering, like, does she actually fall into any of the left categories, or is she trying to cover all the bases?
So this group started a pledge for the candidates to sign on to, saying that they won't take corporate money. And some of them have signed it. And I believe she still hasn't, even though she said she wouldn't. So I'm not really sure what to make of her, to be honest. It's like she's got certain policies that are like, okay, I can get with that. And then other ones that are kind of iffy.
So she does like the idea of prisoners getting to vote. So, but what my question was more so about, like, does she fall into your, because I understand that you feel like there are select issues that progressives are worried about, and if you're not kind of worried about those issues, then you're not necessarily a progressive. Mm-hmm. I think that conservatism has a little bit more of a broader term than what the issues are, and more just like a specific stance and belief to go from there outwards and branch that into everything else. But where does Kamala Harris fall into? Is she a progressive? Is she one of the Hillary Clintons? Where is she?
She's not a centrist. She's pretty far left, but it's not like far enough as to where I would personally say she'd fall under being a progressive. She's kind of wavered on the Medicare for all, which is a big thing, but she's for the Green New Deal. So it's just kind of like certain issues are like, okay, she might be, and then others, it's like, who knows? So I really honestly don't know yet what to make of her.
Yeah. The Green New Deal it's rough. Like, I understand that there are good things in there. There's also insane things that started out in there that they are slowly like rolling back and taking out. And I don't know. Like, I understand that with the issues that we have, according to the issues for climate change, that in order to actually stop it within a reasonable amount of time, that's all the stuff that we would just have to get rid of across the board. Just completely stop all of this stuff, get rid of it, no more, right away. And it just seems impossible. Like, it really does. And some people said, I forget who it was, man. I want to say it was Buttigieg, who said, yes, the Green New Deal is insane and impossible. Isn't that the point? And it's like,
I don't understand. I don't understand. No, so it wasn't anything to be made into law. It was just to kind of be like, okay, yeah, we're going to kind of sign on to doing things like this to achieve a goal. But it was spread out.
They voted on it.
Yeah, because Mitch McConnell is Mitch McConnell, and he wanted to put a vote on it. But it was a non-binding resolution.
She specifically said, if I remember correctly, that it was too early to vote on it. Not that it wasn't supposed to be voted on at all, that it just wasn't supposed to be voted on yet.
I don't know, but it's a non-binding resolution, so it's kind of like yeah, you vote on it, but it's not to make it a law. It's just kind of to like sign on and be like, okay, yeah, we're gonna try and do this and achieve these goals. But Mitch McConnell pushed it. In a what?
Like an accord or something, like where you just say, like a pledge.
Yeah, basically. So, but it was spread out between a good bit of time. And I think, getting rid of fossil fuels, that's great. Using clean energy, that's great. Nuclear power, I'm all for that. So I think it's like starting out with things like that, and that would absolutely create jobs. It's happened in other countries, and even I think Las Vegas started just doing clean energy, and they've made jobs save money. So we'll see what they decide.
So if we go back to the prisoners getting the vote, what is your opinion on that?
I think they should get a vote. If we're talking about, I guess it depends. When you commit a crime, they, can take away some of your rights, basic rights. Yeah. So it just depends how far you think that should be taken. I don't really understand why they shouldn't vote. I see no problem with it. It's my whole point.
Well, we both agree that there are some people who are just not educated enough to really speak on certain things. And I think, and I understand that you and me probably both fall into this category, and it's hard to imagine, but no, being in prison and understanding the people that are in there, I have no problem with them not getting a chance to vote, because they have a very twisted view of the world, and especially the ones who are in prison and are proud of it and think that this is a great thing, and they're going to move their career in whatever it is that they're doing forward because of the time that they're doing in jail right now. And it's terrifying to think that seriously, it's massive amounts, like hundreds of thousands, maybe I'm pretty sure it's up in the millions, and the amount of people that we have in prison right now. And it's specifically felons who do not get the chance to vote for a certain amount of time. So like I'm a felon. I can go back and register to vote pretty soon. And I think that that's a reasonable thing. Take that right away from anybody who commits a felony, not misdemeanors, but a felony, and then give it back to them after they've gone a reasonable amount of time showing that they have been rehabilitated.
So I think that people should start out with rights, and then they should be taken as we see fit. I understand why you would waive your Fourth Amendment right so that they can search you if they need to come search you. I still don't think there's enough evidence to show that we should take somebody's right to vote away, which is like the most basic right for a democracy, which I know we're not technically a democracy, but the right to vote. And I mean, I was in prison, and the people I met, a good bit of them were educated, some were not, but let's talk about people that don't have felonies. You don't take away the right to vote from people that are not educated at all. And yet you think because somebody has a felony, then we can take that right away?
Yeah.
Why?
I think there's differences in extremism. If I'm willing to steal a piece of bubble gum from Walmart versus I'm willing to go into your house and take your bubble gum, that's a very big difference in your cognitive rationale. And I think that it makes sense to take it away and give it back to you. So say you get arrested for going into their house and taking their bubble gum. Well, now you're put on 10 years of probation. And during that time that you're on 10 years probation, you do not get the right to vote. You do not get the right to bear arms. You do not get all sorts of rights. And then once the 10 years is up and you haven't, because if you commit a crime while you're on that probation, then it all starts right back over after you go to jail. And so you get to you get that 10-year period of a clean sheet to prove that you are now a contributing member of society, and that you have now rationalized what is an acceptable way of getting bubblegum.
So most people in prison are there for drug use. Right. So it's not like there's something inherently violent within them or anything like that. And since they have detox because they are in prison, their cognitive abilities are just fine. And we have people on the outside that aren't contributing members of society. We don't take people's right to vote away from them when they do that. We don't take it away if they're dumb or if they know no politics or even know the basics of how the country works. So to expect that from people who are in prison simply because they committed a crime, I don't think I can get behind that.
But they're even on drugs. I mean, there's certain drugs that you can do and it's not a felony, and that's a little bit less of a big deal. You can smoke weed all you want, but until you have, what is it, over an ounce, and then now you're likely selling it, then we're going to say, yes, you are contributing to this this part of society that is actually on the black market, and you're trafficking in drugs, and you're likely associating with all sorts of other illegal people and things that I think it makes sense. I think that drugs are, even me, like I got into drugs in a very odd way, where I just started taking my pain medication that I was prescribed by my doctor, and eventually, went up the escalator to heroin and needles and stuff like that. I consciously made decisions, but I was manipulated by the drugs. And I think even more so, I know that I was a different person when I was doing that. I know that I was not all there and I was not all together, and that I was not somebody who should be making or helping make decisions for other people in America. Because, if all of a sudden they say, hey, we have a vote today on whether or not you can shoot somebody in the head randomly, all of these gangsters in all the prisons are going to be like, hey, all y'all, they're running the prisons, right? And they can now blackmail and manipulate everybody inside there to make sure that they vote the right way. Obviously, it's not a democracy like that. I'm just saying there are issues that that are inside of prison, especially, that can be manipulated by the people who are running the prison. So whether it's the guards, whether it's the gangsters, whether it's, the higher ups, I don't know, I can't think of it right now, but it's been a long day. But anyways, it's people who can manipulate others, inmates, into voting a certain direction.
How would you have voted when you were using?
What do you mean?
Like, would you have voted like an independent, a Republican, or a Democrat?
I probably would have voted, I don't know, it's hard to say. I probably Democrat.
Really? How would you vote now?
Republican, most likely.
That's interesting. Most of the women I met were Republican while I was in prison. Just about everybody was a Republican.
You were in Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very real. Would you take somebody's right to vote away if they literally know nothing? They're not educated on government or how government works, or basically how anything works.
We don't have systems in place for that, but we do have systems in place for people who are not working with our society. We did
used to have like tests for that to kind of keep certain people from voting.
Did we?
Mm-hmm. And we got rid of that for a reason, because it's your basic right to vote. So that's why I think I have such an issue with it, is because it's such a fundamental right. And
didn't we get rid of that because it was targeted towards black people, and you can use that to stop certain people from voting? Not necessarily because it's a fundamental right to where people who are not educated enough, or not, their cognitive abilities are not at a level to where they should be voting. Isn't it? That was more about being able to manipulate the system.
But it also affected poor whites. It wasn't just blacks. It was all poor people that could not afford a certain type of education. So I wouldn't be okay with taking that right from people because of their level of education. So I don't think we should do it to people that are in prison just because they committed a crime, because that doesn't necessarily mean that you then can't be informed on certain issues.
Well, it's not just, it's like, it's not just to say that they are not able to vote anymore, but it's also a repercussion. It is a punishment saying that you are in timeout now and you have to stay in timeout for a while and think about what you've done. It makes sense to me. It's a part of the scare tactic to keep people from committing crimes.
But we know that those things don't deter people from committing crimes at all.
Do we?
Yeah. That punishment doesn't deter people because they're still committing crimes. What deters them is teaching them how to not act on certain urges they have in education, social programs, community programs. Can we agree that the system is completely broken?
In what way? Tell me how it's broken, and I will agree.
Okay. We can start with bail. The fact that you can get arrested and then you have to post a bail. So automatically, if you are poor, you are stuck in jail, and that's that. And then you're more likely to plea out to something you didn't do, or to plea out to big charges that maybe you didn't commit, maybe you committed a lower charge, just to be done with it or to get out.
I won't say it's broken. I will say that there are issues with it and that it's not perfect. But I don't know of a better model than what we currently have. I do think I've personally pled to things that I didn't do, and I hate that that's the way that it's done. And I had a court-appointed attorney that really could have cared less, but I feel like that's still the best option.
What specifically is the best option?
The system that we are currently under.
That we have now.
Yeah. So say you have a bail. We don't want you to run away and throw your $10,000 away. So we put a bail there, and now you're afraid of losing all of this money. Everything runs on.
And then if you have no money, you're screwed. Yeah, if you have no money, you're screwed. So it automatically affects poor people disproportionately.
Yeah, sure, but that's how everything in the world works. You also don't get the bubble gum if you don't have any money. We're not making bubble gum free either.
Yeah, I think that's a little different. But okay, what about mandatory minimums? Do you agree with mandatory minimums?
Yes. So mandatory minimums, really? I feel like, yes. So I feel like it stops judges from giving, say you're a judge and your best friend comes in and is now being charged, and the jury decides that they are now going to be charged, or they even plead guilty. You cannot decide to just let them go free because of mandatory minimums. It keeps the objectivity there, and I understand that there's a big range to where it also has maximums where they can choose anywhere in between, but I still think that that's the best option. I don't know of a better option.
So, as opposed to letting the judge decide, since he is there and hearing the whole situation surrounding the circumstance?
No, but they do hear. They do, though, and that's how they end up on one end or the other end of the spectrum from minimum to maximum. But if it's more based on race or something like that, they don't have that much of an option. They have to fit somewhere in that box.
Yeah, they usually never go with the maximum. But let's say, like my case, I'll go ahead and put that out there. I had a trafficking charge and sales. I was gonna plead to the sales, but not to the trafficking. But my lawyer was like, "Oh my God, if you lose, like you're gonna get way more time." So we decided to go in front of the judge and see what he could do. And we tried working with the DA, but there's a mandatory minimum. So it is what it is. It doesn't matter what the situation is, you're going for that minimum of time. So the judge heard everything, all the circumstances, testimony from people, and he was like, I don't want to send you to prison. I don't think that would be productive for anybody, but I have to. My hands are tied because there's a law with a mandatory minimum. So my thing is, like, the judge can hear the circumstances of the case and see, there may be extenuating circumstances that were going on, but it doesn't matter because there's a mandatory minimum. So they have to give you at least 5 or at least 10 or at least 15, no matter what it is.
So isn't that something that would play out more so in front of a jury, though, and they feel like your extenuating circumstances means that you should not be charged guilty with the matter? And I understand that you're saying that your lawyer said that you shouldn't do that, but I'm saying there is a part of the system that is there for something like that.
Yeah, but they can see a case and say, okay, you're guilty, and then may think, but you don't really deserve this much time because of the circumstances. Or they may look at the case and be like, holy shit, like, no, you need to get a good bit of time for that because of the circumstances. But if you just do like a blanket law, then their hands are tied. They can't do anything.
Yeah, I still think that judges are going to be impartial, and they're going to do things that are wrong, especially, I don't think that there's a lot of racists out there, but that is something that I'm afraid of, especially in a judge, to where they could just say what you get with impunity and have no issues on any blowback. And so I think that a better option is a mandatory minimum.
Well, if they're racist, they're going to give you a good bit of time because of your skin color. So a mandatory minimum is not going to really matter. It's affecting those people with extenuating circumstances.
Right. So I think a better thing is to change the minimums and maximums to fit everything, to where everybody should end up in the middle more often than not. But instead, everybody ends up closer to the minimum on most cases. And I think that means that the minimum is too high and the maximum is too high. And instead of being here, they need to go to here.
Yeah, I agree.
But I wouldn't say the system's broken.
So, do you agree with private prisons? Do you think that's a good idea? Okay.
No, I was in a private prison.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've seen what it is and the profit motive. And I think that that's the main issue, is the profit motive, because even if a jail or a prison is like it's a state ran facility or it's a county one, you still have all the corporations that work with it. There is no reason why for you to have a phone call, you should have to pay $14. That doesn't even make any sense. And it's the same way with, commissary, even with the food. I mean, it's ridiculous. Everything's like 5 times or even 10 times more than the price that it would be at a store. So I think there's just such a big profit motive there. And that's one of my biggest problems with it.
Yeah, I understand that it ends up costing the government less in a lot of cases, and it's a lot less that they have to worry about. But yeah, I don't like private prisons overall because they are corrupt and they have a lot of issues. And like they really like to extend people for the smallest things just so that they can keep them there longer and keep all of their bunks filled. And
Yeah.
I was one of those people. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
like private prisons. But again, to say that the system is broken, no. To say that it has issues, yes. I will say that there are things that need to be fixed, but that's all across America and in lots of our things. And I think that I don't know. I think that most of us are not focusing on some of the biggest issues, and more so we focused on the most polarizing issues. And as you know, I mean, it's one of the issues with getting paid to play or pay for play or whatever it is, where you can pay a politician and contribute to their campaign, or just hand them money outright and say, hey, when you get in office, I need a couple favors and we're going to help you win. And I think that that's a bigger issue that almost all of us agree on, but it's something that won't get changed because of the people that we're paying. I don't think it, honestly, I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it because I don't think it's the biggest issue. But I do think that is something that more so than anything, we can all come to the table and have an agreement on if it gets us somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said, but I do think it's the biggest issue because it then kind of affects all the other issues underneath it. Like most of America agrees that we need to get money out of politics. Like overwhelming, I believe it's like over 90% of it.
Right.
And yet that's not changing, right? They're not doing policy to change that. Why?
Right.
Because they're the ones making money off of it, right?
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen. The overwhelming majority of Americans want some type of Medicare for all system. That's not going to happen because, pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies have bought all these congressmen and women. What about climate change? Nope, because the fossil fuel industry's got them all bought, and paid for. So it's affecting all the smaller issues underneath it because the representatives are not representing the people and their interests because they're too busy making money.
Yeah. I understand why people want it, and I think that there are some smaller factors that aren't as important that I feel like are just overlooked, especially on something like Medicare for All. I think that what I'm always afraid of, and what I don't know, and I haven't found answers to this, you start running Medicare through the government, which I think is just the worst idea in the world. I really do. The government does not do things very extraordinarily well outside of intelligence. Unless it's some sort of intelligence agency or military, they don't do anything extraordinarily well. And so privatized companies are always going to be the best option, which is why I kind of like politicians getting paid, is because I feel like they're not going to become politicians unless they are able to make the big bucks, and they can't make really that much money unless we have that option for them. And so that's one of the things I'm afraid of, is they're going to be in the private sector unless they get that. But on top of that, on Medicare for All, what happens to all of these companies if the government does start running it? We've let them build these ginormous organizations in their entire lives, and all of these other people have built their lives through these insurance companies. And now we just do what? We just say, hey, sorry, there's not a market for you anymore. The government's doing that.
I'd rather people be able to live than somebody make 20 million a year. You're still going to need all these employees to run everything. So people are still going to have jobs. There's still going to be plenty of jobs. You're just cutting out the CEOs, the CFOs of insurance companies?
I think the better option is to fix the pricing on from hospitals and from the people who actually give the care. I think the better option is to say, hey, you can't just charge whatever the hell you want. You need to give specific prices. Somebody needs to call you and say, hey, how much is it going to cost for me to get an x-ray on my knee? And you have to give them an option. You have to give them a price. And I think that the market fixes itself in that case for the most part.
That would be great, and I would agree with you if the system we had didn't work the way that it does. So, like, let me ask you, like, genuinely, do you think that if we didn't do Medicare for all or anything like that, that they would willingly vote to put those regulations in place against the insurance company who have given all of them money?
Again, I said I'm willing to concede that point. Like I feel like that's a fair enough option. I've explained what my fears are on it, but I don't think those are strong enough for me to fight anybody on it. So I'm not willing to fight somebody on politicians getting paid from outside companies. But on Medicare specifically, yes, I think that is somewhere where we can just fix something instead of making a ginormous change to the whole system. And I think instead we just tweak one little thing, and I think the market fixes itself.
I think it would lower prices, but if people still don't have money to even afford that to begin with, they're still screwed, which is why I'm for Medicare for all. It's not necessarily just because like, oh, this is too expensive, which it is. Our healthcare system costs more than anywhere in the world. And it's not as good, anywhere near as good. So I'm more worried about the people that can't.
But our healthcare is, though. The actual care that is being given is really good. It is
It's like 25th or something like that in the world. So, I mean, it's way better than...
Hold on. No. Okay. So it's 25th in, like, I want to say, like, 2 categories, like infant mortality and life expectancy. And literally everywhere else, it's, like, top 5, top 10 at the least. You get AIDS, you want to get AIDS in America. You get cancer, you want to get cancer in America. That you want this, the biggest problems that we have, America is the one that fixes those things. They're the ones with the money for the innovation to come up with the new technology and the new medicines that are revolutionary. Everywhere else that has the Medicare for all and government aid and things like that, they're not doing that because they don't have the money for the research.
I was just gonna say something and now I forgot. Those statistics cover a bunch of different things, and we are better as far as the timing and how fast you get in. When
Especially
you're talking about
anybody getting it from the government.
Yeah, when you're talking about the latest cancer treatments or the best surgery, would you say that it's going to be pretty expensive?
Yes.
How many people are going to be able to afford that to begin with, to get that type of care, of specialized care?
A small amount, the people who can afford it.
And that's the problem. It doesn't really... What good is it if like a few people here and there can get this awesome care, but then down here everybody else is screwed because you can't afford it? So that's why I'm more worried about society as a whole and everybody getting the health care they need, as opposed to like, okay, we have some really good treatments for this and that only certain people can afford.
Okay. You know what? Let's pause this for a second. All right, so we went through a bunch of different studies, or I guess graphs of what we could look at The first one we went to said U.S. was ranked at like 11th overall healthcare, but then had them ranked at 36 somewhere else. I'm just more confused, but I still think in my head, for the most part, having people compete straight, broadly in money is what gets you the best type of service and normally the lowest cost of service. So again, I think that if they just give you specific prices, that the cost does go down, and that if this hospital has to compete versus that hospital, then they're going to lower their prices and the market kind of fixes itself.
I can, and I can see that and I can agree with that. And my only problem with that is that other people who need care and can't afford it still wouldn't get it. So I agree with what you're saying. Like if they set certain regulations, it would bring prices down for everything. But, as I said, other people who don't have the money still wouldn't get the care that they need to survive.
Okay, so we take that and we say, all right, so those people aren't going to get it. So now we go ahead and go to Medicare for all or Medicaid for all, and then maybe if we're already ranked lower on the countries, we likely get ranked even lower now because government is not the best at paying the best people. So if the smartest guy in my class right now probably wants to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, but as soon as we say, hey, you're not going to get paid as much because the government's going to start running this stuff, now he doesn't want to be a doctor anymore. Now somebody dumb like me ends up being a doctor.
So I don't know if you noticed on the charts all the countries that were the top countries for healthcare have universal healthcare systems in place.
Again, we don't know what their system is for ranking this. I feel like the cost is a part of it, which I would imagine if you take cost out of it, it's going to change dramatically.
Well, I'll say we'll just have to revisit this one, and we'll look up like specific statistics dealing with specific issues and see if it's just cost or how exactly they're being ranked. I just know it's like an overall ranking.
Yeah, we have other stuff we could talk about. I know that my last podcast with Todd Church, I did not answer a lot of the questions that you had about it because I thought it would be better to do it on here. So you had some issues, especially I believe with the part where he's going through Bible verses and things like that. Do you want to present your...
Oh yeah, let's totally do this. So he brought up slavery, and that's one of my biggest issues with the Bible is all the slavery laws. So I mean, I don't know. I know you disagreed with him or you were looking them up as you went.
Mm-hmm. And the one that we didn't look up was the slavery one. That's the one that when I went back and watched it, I realized he went off on like a list of Bible verses, and that one just ended up being skipped. It was not on purpose. I would love to address that one. At the time, I didn't know which Bible verse he was talking about or what the context was. And so if we had gone into that one, I would have loved to address it. But continue.
So I believe it's Exodus 21, and it talks about how you can enslave people. The punishment if you beat them and they die within a couple of days. Then you have the verses talking about how you can enslave foreigners for life. Like the Hebrews around you, you can enslave for only a certain amount of time. So it'd be like indentured servitude. But the foreigners you can enslave forever. They're your property, and you can treat them as your property. If they have kids, like they're your property as well. So I just take issue with the whole slavery thing, and it's just surprising to me that most people haven't heard about that.
Okay. So from my understanding of most of these verses, so here's Exodus 21. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. But in the 7th year, he shall go free without paying anything. This is where the issue comes. Lots of Bibles in the 20th century were retranslated, and because more and more countries were getting rid of slavery, and there was this issue with, well, is slavery right or wrong? And there was just, societies were having these giant conversations about it. The Bible ended up translating the word servant over and over and over to slave, to where in the Old Testament it may have mentioned it 3 times. In the Luther version, I believe, in the New King James Version, it ended up over 300 times. And it was the same exact word for both. So if you look at, I want to say it's Greek, I believe, was the original translation that they were using when they put the Bible together. That the word Ebed, Ebbed, was used as both slave and servant. It was the same. It's the same exact word in that language. And so when we have, and I know that you think the Bible contradicts itself a lot, but I would say that is highly contradictory to say, hey, you can enslave this person, but you need to, help everybody and be kind to each other and things like that. And I think that lots of these times that the word can just be changed to servant, and it's a little bit different. So even in that one, in Exodus 20, it was talking about paying them. You don't pay a slave. So that
was with Hebrews.
Okay. So if it's not Hebrew, you're saying
there's different laws for foreigners. So one question, is it immoral to own a person as property?
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you call them a servant or a slave, you're still owning them as property.
Okay.
So that's my, and I have heard that, I did read something about that the word translates different in certain spots as servant or slave. But if it says that you can own a foreigner and that they are your property and you can own them for life, so they're a servant for life, then let's use the word servant. Wouldn't that still be immoral because you're owning a person?
Kind of. So I want to say it's Deuteronomy also says that if a servant or Ebed, it says if your Ebed runs away, you are not allowed to track them down and bring them back. And if you find this servant that has run away, you are not allowed to take them back to the owner. So I think that there is just a little bit of tweaking to the idea of ownership. If a company, pays these employees, they could say, yeah, we own all of these employees. I don't think that would, really, in my head, I wouldn't even realize what they are saying as owning unless they were saying that they were slaves. And if they're talking about paying people, and they don't ever mention tying them up, chaining them up, anything like that, ever. They never talk about that sort of stuff.
You only pay the Hebrews. You can't enslave the Hebrews. You can use them as servants, like slave servants, like indentured servitude. The foreigners, they kept as actual property and servants. They marked them, they would put, I forgot the word, an awl through their ear to mark them. You could give them a wife, and if they had kids, the kids were then your property. You could beat them, hey, but as long as they didn't die within 2 days, you didn't get in trouble.
I know that the Bible, where is this verse? Because I know of verses that say specifically that you cannot lay a hand or harm any of your servants, or even when it's translated to slaves, it says the same thing.
I don't know. I thought it's either under Exodus 21, they'll give you a bunch of laws about it, or it's in, oh God, Deuteronomy or Leviticus. I can't remember the exact place. We're going to have to look it up.
Because okay, so it says anyone who strikes a person, and this is in Exodus. It says anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, if it is not done intentionally, God lets it happen. They are to flee to a place I will designate. But if anyone schemes and kills somebody deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death.
No, that's just regular laws to other people, but not the slave laws.
Okay.
And I know people say, oh, it's not the same as chattel slavery that we had here. I'm not saying it is in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is that it's immoral to own another person as property.
I get it. And again, I think that owning a person is not, I don't know. I think that across the board, and I know that this is your issue with the Bible as well in other parts, and it's lots of Christians still have the same issue, is the word or translation that is being used to where we can be so confused to where we don't even have a clue what it's trying to say and what they're talking about at all. And we talked about this once before recently where if you want to be a Baptist pastor or something like that, you have to go to seminary first and learn all of these different languages so that you can translate it into a more modern way of speaking. And you know, I know we got to run pretty soon. Did you have the verse or anything that I can pull up?
No, I don't remember what it was.
Okay, well, we'll write it down.
Just look up beating a slave real quick in the Bible. It should pull up the verse.
Yeah, I have, does the Bible support slavery and slavery in the Bible? And I guess I need to add in a verse.
Then you have in the New Testament, slaves obey your earthly masters. Like, I just don't, even if it's servant, doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, this is back to Exodus 21. Yeah, these are all. These are all just commentary on the Bible instead of the actual verses. So we'll try to, I guess, get back to this one next time. I'll
have the verses.
We can go ahead and assume that will be something that we will talk about.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that. All right. I appreciate you coming on, Kat. Everybody, if you have any more information or things that we didn't cover or something like that, go ahead, put it in the comments. Do you have a Twitter account or anything that they can reach you on if people want to hear more from you?
Just a Facebook. It's Kat Silva, KATSILVA.
Man, you're off the grid. You're just on Facebook.
I know. I hate social media.
YouTube always tells me I have to comment on other people's videos. I have to get a Twitter account, all of this stuff to help my, page grow. It's not growing. So I went ahead and did those things this week, and it actually has seen a pretty big hit from it. So
yeah,
I'm going to have
might
to
as well.
I have to do the whole stupid Twitter thing now. I hate that format, but thanks for coming on, Kat.
No problem. Bye.
Later, fools.